today we're going to have a look at Mula Bandha. So Mula Bandha is one of the foundations of the Ashtanga practice. So, I mean, bandhas in general, there are 3 bandhas, of which Mula Bandha is one. And they're quite important within the Ashtanga practice. But Mula Bandha especially is quite significant, I believe, for all of yoga practice. Partly because of what it brings energetically, but also because of what it brings in terms of kind of the stability of the center of the body and the lower spine. So I think it's something that it's really important to understand. And I think one of the easiest ways of understanding is by kind of getting into the anatomy of it, because it's one of those things that you can kind of experience, but my experience of it is that it can take years of yoga practice before you really kind of get what it is. And so looking at the anatomy of it can be quite helpful. Does anybody have, I know I've covered Mula Bandha with some of you before, but are there any kind of questions before we start? Is there anything that like people are completely like, what the hell is that?
No.
Awesome. Okay, so I am now going to attempt to do something that I have never done on Zoom before, and that is to woohoo!
Well done.
That kind of worked. Now I just need to find the option to. Okay, that should be full screen for you all now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. Look, see, tech pro. Okay, so Mula Bandha, as I said, it's one of a number of bandhas. So this image here shows you the 3 key bandhas. So you've got Mula Bandha, which is right at the very bottom. It's your kind of root lock. It's the same space as the root chakra would be. You've got Uddiyana Bandha, which is kind of lower belly, abdomen kind of area. And then you've got Jalandhara Bandha, which is in the throat. We're not going to look at Uddiyana Bandha or Jalandhara Bandha at all. We're going to focus on Mula Bandha for this. And the reason for that is because Mula Bandha is one of the essential foundations of yoga practice. And really, Mula Bandha should be engaged or activated in all asana work. So whether you're forward folding, whether you're back bending, whether it's twists, inversions, arm balances, you really should have Mula Bandha engaged. But each of those kind of different asanas kind of give you different challenges in the ability to kind of hold and experience Mula Bandha. Once you kind of understand and can kind of feel and connect with Mula Bandha, then it starts to become something that's quite obvious to you when you're not using it, which is quite interesting when you sort of develop your practice, so you really notice when it's not there, and after a while it will just become second nature. I mean, I don't consciously use my bandhas anymore, but I never don't. It just kind of happens. I get on my mat. It's like the ujjayi breath. When you start to practice with it consistently all of the time, you don't think, oh, I'm going to breathe the ujjayi now. I get on my mat. I stand at the front of my mat. My bandhas engaged. My ujjayi breath begins, and that's the start of my practice. So it just becomes a kind of second nature. So the thing with Mula Bandha is that it's really hard to get your head around kind of where it is and what it is, which is why I thought we would go into the anatomy of it. So this is kind of the general area in which Mula Bandha is. So it is that kind of pelvic floor, the perineum area. And that area stretches right the way from the kind of anus, right the way through to the pubic bone at the front of the body. So it encompasses quite a big area. And you'll often hear yoga teachers talk about Mula Bandha in terms of the perineum and lift the perineum or lift the pelvic floor. And I think part of the reason for that is because that's the kind of most superficial area, as in close to the skin, part of the body that people can associate it with. And it's terminology that generally we're all familiar with. It's actually smaller than that whole area because the perineum contains the anal sphincter and it also contains all of the genital muscles. And Mula Bandha is distinct from that. Although when you start practicing, you tend to find that that whole area contracts and lifts. And one of the first things you have to learn is the difference between kind of the muscles at the front, the muscles at the back, and the muscles in the middle. So the muscle that we're really interested in is much deeper inside the body. And that muscle is called the pubococcygeus, pubococcygeus, I think. So forgive my pronunciation. It's otherwise known as the PC muscle, and it's the one in this diagram that's highlighted in green. So what you're looking at here is a view of the pelvis from above. So if you look at the very top of the picture, that big kind of circle and the sticky outy bit at the top, that's the spine. And then you've got the kind of hip bones or the sit bones, and then at the front you've got the pubic bone and the cartilage that kind of joins that together. Now, obviously, there are anatomical differences between a male pelvis and a female pelvis. But in general terms, what we're talking about works the same, whether you're male or female. And that PC muscle is the same in both men and women. What you're kind of seeing underneath that, the kind of lighter colour, the red colour underneath that muscle, is much more the kind of area that might be referred to as the perineum, the much kind of larger body of space. And the PC muscle is also known as the Mula Bandha muscle in kind of yoga terms, and that's because the PC muscle kind of is Mula Bandha. And it stretches from the pubic bone right the way back to the tailbone, and also to kind of both sides of your sit bones. And in really crude terms, it's the muscle that stops all of your internal organs from falling out and landing on the floor. Like, if it wasn't there, we'd all be in big trouble. Things wouldn't be staying put. So I've lost my notes. What am I talking about? That's right. And the muscle itself is it's kind of a little bit like, it's kind of a hammock-like muscle, if you like. And what happens is that when it lifts, it kind of lifts in the middle, and the four corners of it obviously stay attached to the bone. So the middle of it pulls up, and the rest of it will stay down and attached. So it would make that sort of shape. I was trying to find something that I had in the house that I could use to demonstrate that, and I couldn't find anything at all. So, yeah, that's that bit. Okay, so Mula Bandha does also kind of connect in with the lower belly and the fibers in the lower belly, because what happens is when you lift Mula Bandha, then it naturally creates a kind of pulling and lifting up within the lower belly. And because of that, Mula Bandha and those muscles that get involved are kind of the foundations of your core strength. It's the foundations of what kind of gives you all of that strength that's within the center of your body. And because of that, it's not possible to hold Mula Bandha if you're belly breathing, which is one of the reasons why we tend to work with the breath then with the bandhas, because you need to learn how to breathe and how to expand and contract the rib cage, certainly if you're naturally a belly breather, before you're able to really work with Mula Bandha, because if you're breathing into your belly, it's simply not going to work. And so the reason I put this particular picture up is because when you activate Mula Bandha, when you actually lift up through Mula Bandha, then the transverse abdominis and the oblique muscles are also set to work, so they also come online. And you can see here that the transverse abdominis and the oblique muscles are actually quite deep muscles. Like everything that you can see, i.e. our kind of six-pack muscles, sit on top of all of that, which is why when I'm teaching, you'll quite often hear me referring to those deep abdominal muscles. And that's because those are the muscles that I'm talking about. If those are pulling in and lifting up, then the chances are that you've activated Mula Bandha without really knowing that you were working with Mula Bandha. It's quite useful to kind of have an idea of where those muscles are. And it also feeds into this idea that Mula Bandha is kind of the foundation of core strength, because if you look at where these muscles are, all of those really deep muscles, if they're not strong, then your abdominals are not going to be strong, even if you've got a six-pack. You know, you can tone those muscles and still have everything underneath being weak. So it's really important to get right the way in and sort of work from the inside out. And because of this, Mula Bandha is also a really key thing for preventing and for alleviating back pain, because it keeps all of that area kind of stable. And it also, that kind of activation of all of those core muscles are really helpful for grounding and for supporting the spine. And they also obviously then, by default, all then connects into the hips and into the legs, and kind of provides that central support throughout the body. Any questions before I move on? No? Okay, cool. This is the last slide. So this is kind of what we're going to start to look at now, is how do we access Mula Bandha, and how does Mula Bandha work with the breath? And you would be forgiven for making the assumption that when you inhale, then that's when you would engage Mula Bandha. You would inhale, draw everything up and engage Mula Bandha. Well, actually you don't. Mula Bandha comes in on the exhale. And the reason for that is that because Mula Bandha is an effective diaphragm, it works in exactly the same way that the diaphragm in your chest works when you breathe. And if you think about that, when you inhale, the diaphragm actually relaxes because it needs to relax to enable your lungs to fill with air. When you exhale, that's when the diaphragm pulls in and lifts up, because the lungs are no longer full of air, so it's got that space to lift up. Mula Bandha is exactly the same. So when you exhale, that's when Mula Bandha lifts, and when you inhale, that's when it drops slightly. And once you sort of learning and starting to get to grips with Mula Bandha, then you can keep the engagement on the inhale, but the kind of activation is always on the exhale, and you'll tend to find that on the inhale it would become slightly less activated and then stronger again on the inhale. And part of the reason for that is because the way it works is that there's a tendon that kind of attaches to the center of the PC muscle. I think it's called the perineal tendon. So there's a tendon that attaches to the center of that muscle. And that tendon on the exhale pulls up, and that's what lifts Mula Bandha. And then obviously on the exhale, when your diaphragm relaxes, that tendon also relaxes and the PC muscle will relax at the same time. Okay. Any questions?
Jenna, you were saying about them not being the same as six-pack muscles. I understand that.
Yeah.
If you said, oh, okay, you know, if you were training your six-pack muscles, presumably by doing abdomen type exercises, that would do your six-pack muscles. Is there a way of training your PC muscle?
Mula Bandha, I mean, that's kind of the way that we would train it. Is we're going to do some exercises in a second to kind of help you connect and engage with it. But there's that, but there's also just having the understanding of the anatomy of what we're talking about, which is why I wanted to go into the anatomy today, because I've talked about this before, but it's all quite subtle, and you might feel something and you might not feel something. But once you kind of understand what you're working with, if you think about it, every single time you practice, you start to draw all of this in and up, then inevitably you're going to tone that muscle because you're using it all of the time.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, cool. Right, in that case, you can stop sitting up, which you're probably quite glad about. We're going to actually start the the exercises to sort of connect with this laying down. So if you want to lay flat down on your back, feet flat on the floor, so knees bent. And starting off just by connecting with your breath. So beginning to notice your inhale and your exhale. And then maybe sighing the breath out for a few breaths. So taking a deep inhale and then exhale, blowing the breath out through the mouth. Inhaling and then exhale, sighing the breath out. I've muted you all so nobody can hear you. And now you're going to start to lengthen your exhale. So just for a few breaths, consciously lengthening the exhale and focusing on expelling as much air from the body as you can as you exhale. So you find that as you get to the end of your exhale, the belly's really pulling back in towards the spine. Don't strain the exhale, allow it to be fairly natural. But really trying to squeeze all of the last bits of air out. And then bring your attention to Mula Bandha, to that PC muscle, that whole kind of pelvic region. And rest your awareness there. And for a few breaths, just notice what you feel on the exhale. So you might find that as you exhale, as you really get to the bottom of that exhale, all of the air's left your body, the belly's contracting, falling back towards the spine. You might find that as that happens, right at the end of that exhale, you can feel a slight lift starting to happen in the PC muscle. And then as you inhale, that would release. And then as you exhale again, the closer you get to the end of the exhale, you might find that contraction starts to feel stronger and stronger. Now this can be really subtle. And so if you're not experiencing any sensations of this kind at the moment, that's absolutely fine. It takes practice, and it takes quite a lot of an awareness of mind-body connection to really connect into these deep, deep muscles. So that if this kind of practice isn't something that you're used to, then it might be quite challenging at first to find it. So don't worry if it's not there for you immediately. This is just about that experience for now. We're just continuing for a few more breaths to focus on the exhale. And continuing to just inquire as to what your experience is. Okay, so releasing the focus on the breath for now, and releasing any connection to Mula Bandha. Bring your knees into your belly, allow yourself a knee hug. And then rock your way up to seated. So without some connection into those kind of deep abdominal muscles, those obliques, transverse abdominis, etc., and the PC muscle, none of you would have rocked up to seated then. You wouldn't have made it. So you do all have a connection, whether you were aware of it or not. So we're going to sit probably for about 10 minutes. So find a comfortable seat. It doesn't have to be cross-legged. It can be however you want to sit. So I would like you to try and find a nice straight spine, if you can. And sometimes these practices can be quite helpful with your eyes closed, but it's entirely up to you. Kind of the usual, either close your eyes or take a relaxed downward gaze. We're not going to worry too much about the breath for this first exercise that we're going to do in seated. So just breathe naturally. And to start with, contract the muscles that you believe that you would be using if you were trying to stop yourself from weeing in mid-flow. And you can contract and release a few times. And then let that go. And then contract your anal muscles. And you can contract and release a few times. And then let that go. And then contract the muscles that are between the front and the back. So see if you can isolate, so not the muscles that you contracted when we were talking about those muscles that you might be using if you're trying to stop yourself from going for a wee. Not your anal muscles, but that point in between those two. Just sit for a minute or two and experiment. Like, can you isolate front, back and middle? Or when you contract, does everything lift, which is a completely normal experience when you're starting to learn Mula Bandha and you're starting to experiment with these muscles. Any muscle isolation takes time to learn. If you find that when you contract, you're lifting everything, are you able within that lift to notice where the front is, where the back is, and where the center is? There is no right or wrong. This is all about your experience. Okay, let that go. Open your eyes and have a bit of a wiggle around, shake your legs, etc. I've unmuted you all briefly in case anybody has any questions. Cool. I can't believe for a second you lot would be this quiet if you were physically here. Okay, I will mute you all again. So, find your comfortable seat again. It doesn't matter what that is. Don't mind me. I need to move. I've been sat on this leg way too long. And we're going to come back into that kind of seated breathing. So nice straight spine if you can. Either closing the eyes or taking a nice relaxed downward gaze. Notice the rib cage expanding and contracting as you breathe. And this time we're looking for those sensations that you may have found laying down, but from a seated position. So focusing on the exhale and focusing specifically on the end of the exhale when you might feel that that natural lift starts to occur. And seeing if at the end of the exhale you can lift the PC muscle. And then as you inhale, allow that to release. So as you exhale, see if you can lift and inhale, release. You might find that if you can really develop a connection to this, that as you exhale, you feel the lift almost instantly coming on, and then it becomes more and more intense. And then you release to inhale. And as I said before, if you are experiencing a lift in the whole of the kind of perineal area, that's fine. Really don't worry about it. Just allow yourself to be with your experience, looking for that lift on the exhale, release on the inhale. Okay, finding your way back into your space again. Giving your legs a bit of a shake out. We're going to sit once more for a couple of minutes. So just allow yourself to shake anything out. Just your seated position if you need to. I know we've been sat for quite a long time now. It can get tough. And then find your way back to your seat. Lifting through the crown of your head as always, and starting off just by allowing your attention to rest with your breath, noticing the expansion and contraction of your rib cage as you breathe. And then returning to what we were just doing. So as you exhale, seeing if you can find that lift throughout the exhale. But this time when you inhale, try not to release fully. So as you inhale, just a partial release as you inhale. Exhale, the lift comes on more intense. Partial release as you inhale. So you keep some connection throughout the breath to Mula Bandha, to the lift of the PC muscle. Okay, so letting go of that. Opening your eyes if they're closed, finding your way back into your space. I've unmuted you all briefly. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Cool. Okay, I'm going to mute you all. Okay, we're going to stand up. It's quite exciting when you've been sat down for nearly 45 minutes. Okay. Just starting off just by giving arms and legs a bit of a shake out. I expect legs and knees are feeling this a little bit. Okay. So we're not going to do a huge amount of movement, but we're going to do a little bit of movement to try and connect the movement with any sensations that you may have found. So just start by bringing your hands to your hips. Just nice soft knees, so very slight bend in the knees. Feet about hip width, maybe a little bit wider, just a comfortable stance. And what we're going to do, so I'll show you what we're going to do first. As you inhale, you're going to kind of arch the back and stick your bum out. And then as you exhale, you're going to tuck the tailbone underneath. pulling the pubic bone towards you. So inhaling, pelvis tilts. Inhaling, pelvis tilts forwards. So really slow and gentle. So inhale, pubic bone moves towards your tailbone. And then exhale, tailbone comes towards your pubic bone. So keep that going. Nice and slow. So this is a really, really slow movement. And what you should start to experience is that as you exhale and move your tailbone towards your pubic bone, that you might find you can feel the contraction in Mula Bandha, but you should also feel that the lower belly starts to engage, and that in some cases you might even feel that moving right the way up into those deep, deep abdominal muscles. And then as you inhale and move your pubic bone towards your tailbone, all of that starts to release. Exhale, everything comes online, pulls in and lifts up. And then exhaling, that all starts to release. And then bring your pelvis back to neutral. And then just try and root through the earth, lift through the crown of your head with that neutral pelvis. And neutral pelvis is different for everyone because we're all built differently. So just rooting down through the earth, connect to your breath again. And see if you can exhale and find the lift on the exhale. And then inhale, see if you can keep that contraction in place. Exhale, lift, get stronger. Inhale, slight contraction remains in place. And you might find that now that you're stood, that when you've got that contraction in place, that you can start to feel that into those deep abdominal muscles. You might find that around the lower belly, you can feel a contraction coming online. Okay, allow all of that to release, shake everything out a little bit again. Okay, we're going to have a look at a forward fold. Quite a simple movement in many respects. But what we're interested in the forward fold is that every time you fold forwards, this kind of interplay between the tailbone and the pubic bone starts to happen. So what happens is, as you fold forward, your pubic bone starts to move down between your legs and it chases, in effect, your tailbone. And then when you come out of a forward fold, the tailbone starts to lead the way, moving towards your pubic bone that then finds its way back from between your legs. So if you want to place one hand on your tailbone and one hand resting on your pubic bone to start with, and we will just start. So you would inhale and expand through the chest. And then exhale, pubic bone moves towards tailbone. Pubic bone keeps moving between your legs. We're not folding very far forwards here for now. And then inhale, tailbone comes back towards pubic bone starts to move back through the legs and to the front. And again, exhaling, pubic bone moves down towards tailbone. And then inhaling, tailbone moves towards pubic Okay, you can release your hands. Just try that a few more times. Feel free to leave your hands if that's helpful. So exhaling, feeling pubic bone moving down towards tailbone. And then inhaling, tailbone back towards pubic bone. Do this twice more in your own time. See if you can connect to Mula Bandha as you do that. So as you exhale, see if you can find the lift. And then keep that slight contraction as you inhale and come back up to center. Nice. Right, shake your legs out again. We're actually going to do a whole forward fold. So I don't mind where your feet are for your forward fold, wherever is this comfortable place for you. So find your neutral pelvis, whatever the neutral pelvis is for you. Take an inhale and then take an exhale and see if you can bring Mula Bandha online as you exhale while you're stood here. And then when you're ready, keep the contraction as you inhale to wide stretch and reach up. And then exhale, see if you can intensify the contraction as you wide stretch, fold forwards, pubic bone moves towards tailbone, coming down between the legs, all the way down. Bend knees obviously if you need to. Allow your hands to rest, I don't mind where or how for this. And we're going to take a few breaths here in the forward fold. So see if you can keep a connection to Mula Bandha as you stay here and breathe. And then we're going to inhale, come up to a tabletop flat back. Exhale there, see if you can find Mula Bandha. Keep the connection. Inhale, we're going to stay in tabletop for a few breaths. Just being with your experience here. And then on your next inhale, you're going to wide stretch, come all the way up. And exhaling, hands come down towards your sides. Okay, shake everything out. We're going to take a vinyasa just to get to the floor. So come to the front of your mats. Try and keep this connection with Mula Bandha. Try not to let that go as we start to move very slightly more dynamically. So, connecting into your bandha. On an exhale, finding the lift. And then inhaling, wide stretch, reach all the way up. On your exhale, wide stretch, fold forward, lift bandha, pubic bone moves between the legs towards tailbone. Inhale, tailbone towards pubic bone, come up to tabletop. Exhale, pubic bone towards tailbone, plant hands and step back to plank. Lower all the way down to the earth. Tuck your tailbone. Nice lift through Mula Bandha. Really strong to the deep abdominals here. Inhale, come up to cobra. Exhale. Nice strong contraction as you unfold to downward dog. And then walk the dog. So we're going to take a few breaths. We're going to spend a few breaths here in downward dog. So try not to lose your connection. And then inhaling to step or jump to seated. And we are going to come and lay flat down on our backs. Feet hip width apart, hands down by your sides. So connecting here to your breath again. Exhale, find the connection with the bandha. Lift. Try and keep the connection as you inhale. And then we're going to move into bridge pose. So keeping that connection in Mula Bandha. On an inhale, you're going to lift your pelvis up one vertebrae at a time. And then exhaling, nice strong lift through Bandha as you lower your vertebrae back down to the earth. You might find here that you can feel that extra strong connection here into your deep abdominal muscles. Keep Mula Bandha engaged as you then inhale to lift. And in your own time, exhale to lower. So keep this movement going. Work with your breath. So notice any sensations. Notice any isolation of muscles. Notice any coming online of those really, really deep abdominal muscles. But also know that whatever experience you're having of this is absolutely fine. As I said at the beginning, this can take years of practice to get to grips with. So don't expect to get to the end of one class and to have had a light bulb moment. So wherever you are now, lowering yourself for one last time back down to the earth. And we're going to go to Shavasana. We're only going to be there for a couple of minutes. But do, if you need to, grab blankets or anything like that. Really settle yourself down into your mat, into your space. And then really, really let go. So let go of your focus. Let go of connection to your bandha. Shavasana is about completely letting go of everything. So there is absolutely no need here to focus on anything. So really, really consciously let go. Let it all relax. Let your whole body relax. Let go of all effort. Let go of all trying. Let go of all doing. Just allow your body and mind to be still. Welcome the stillness within. Wiggling fingers and toes. And then being aware of the space around you, hands overhead for a lovely fingertip to toe tip stretch. Really stretch right the way out through your fingers and toes. Finding your way then to your right hand side. And then finding your way to seated. Okay, I've unmuted you all for closing. So bringing hands up overhead in the Prana Mudra. Bringing hands together overhead to the crown of your head. To your third eye for wisdom and clarity of thought. To your lips and then your throat for peace and love in all that we say. And to your heart space to love unconditionally. And thank you all for sharing tonight's slightly unusual yoga practice. Namaste.
Namaste.